Welcome to Direct Approach, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by Wayne Moorhead, filled with timely insights, fresh perspectives, and actionable takeaways from your direct selling executive peers to help fuel the growth and evolution of your business. Wondering what it takes for direct selling companies to thrive in the Latin American markets? Tune in for valuable insights into the Hispanic and Latino markets from two true legends in the direct selling industry. Our guests, Bala, Mannatech Board Advisor, and Alex Hoffman, Senior Global C-Level Executive, have unparalleled experience and a deep understanding of the unique dynamics that drive success in these rapidly growing markets. Don't miss the latest Direct Approach podcast, where they'll be sharing their expertise on what it takes to build meaningful connections, create supportive structures, and ultimately thrive in these regions. But before we begin, we'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, Exego. Tired of struggling with outdated systems and inflated technical debt? Are you losing time and money on staff or software inefficiencies? Exego can help. Our all-in-one platform as a service simplifies everything from commissions to reporting to e-commerce. With Exego, you can finally focus on growing your business, not managing it. Don't let technical headaches hold you back. Visit exego.com and discover how Exego can transform your MLM company. Now let's welcome your host, Wayne Moorhead, and his guests, Bala and Alex Hoffman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Moorhead, and today I'm joined by two guests that I'm sure you are all familiar with. They've had incredible careers in direct selling that range from running entire organizations to leading growth in diverse global markets. They have deep experience and understanding in the Hispanic and Latino markets, and will share valuable insights with us today on how to support and succeed in these growing markets. Our first guest has more than 37 years of direct selling experience and is literally a direct selling legend. He's worked in both domestic and international markets, including growing a huge direct selling sales organization to 750 million. He's also led one of the few public companies in the channel for 8 years, and amazingly is conversant or fluent in 13 languages. Our second guest has over 30 years of experience as a senior global executive at the C-level. His track record includes expanding markets for some of the largest companies in the channel, as well as building two thriving businesses in the field. So brings that incredible perspective as well. I am honored to welcome my friends, Bala, advisor of the board at Mannatech, and Alex Hoffman, global C-level executive. Al and Alex, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Wayne.
It's always great to chat with you. Our paths have crossed many times throughout our careers. I've been able and fortunate to learn a lot from each of you and work with each of you. And I know personally your experience and expertise is truly incredible. You offer all of us, all of our companies, amazing insights into one of the most important and fastest growing areas in direct selling, as well as just building and scaling businesses domestically and around the world. And we're excited to learn all these insights from you today and have you drop some knowledge on us and really regarding how we can create deeper connections and support with these vibrant markets and communities. So Alex, I want to start with you here. At DSU, you and Stuart shared some pretty amazing statistics regarding the Hispanic and Latino markets. And honestly, I know it's a growing segment. It's a very important segment, not just in direct selling, but around the world. But until I heard some of these stats, I think I wasn't fully aware of the extent and the growth that is happening. And it really drove home to me that our companies have to have a strategy. If we don't have something in place, we're really going to get left behind. Can you talk a little bit about the full size and potential of these markets around the world?
Yeah, so thank you, Wayne, and it's a pleasure to be here with you and Al. And yeah, during the last DSA, I had the pleasure to sharing with people about the growth of Latin America and the Americas, as well as a whole continent. And we were talking about how the Americas is leading the charge with an impressive 73% of countries enjoying higher direct selling penetration, which is something that we haven't seen in probably 10 years or so. A lot of companies were focused on Asia or Europe or some other regions, but the Americas have been taking a huge opportunity growth right now. And it's based on several different factors. We talked about how the middle class has been growing. We talked about how technology has been taking a huge growth in all of the different countries in South America, Central and South America, where more people have cell phones than computers, and more apps, and more communication penetration through cell phones, and so many other factors. And of course, here in the United States, we have seen how the Latino or Hispanic community is the fastest growing minority, accounting to about 63 million people. And so putting all of those factors together, we have seen a renewed opportunity within the Hispanic throughout the whole America's continent.
Absolutely. Al, can you talk a little bit about the incredible opportunity for all our companies there?
Well, I think it's been very obvious. Again, thank you, Wayne, and glad to be here with you and Alex. This is a very important subject, I think, for companies. I know just coming out of a CEO position for an iconic direct selling company, we had established the Hispanic growth as one of the two or three major strategies for the next 2 to 5 years, because we understand that everything that all the numbers there are pointing to the fact that it's going to probably be the future of our space. I think Alex is right. For many years, we focused on Asia, especially China. We know the kinds of barriers most companies have faced there, and yet really close to us, geographically, we have the Americas, and the Americas is easy to get to. But for me, what really makes the Americas really, really critical is the fact that the Latino, the Hispanic business in the U.S. is probably the largest Latino business that exists, in any other country. So for me, this focus on expanding geographically into the Latin America is really more about building your Hispanic business in North America, because that's really a thriving market, both in general business. I think there's, I think the growth of just Latino-owned businesses in the U.S. is 34%. When you look at it from 2007 to 2012, 34%. 4.7 million Latino-owned businesses, over 700 billion, close to $1 trillion of business happening in the Latino communities, which I think direct sales can play a major and have a big piece of, a big share of that market as well. So I think if we understand that, then I think we'll talk a little bit later about why it's important to have a strategic plan for expanding in Latin America, but truly so you can bolster your local, your U.S. Latino business, which I think is going to see tremendous growth over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the most important and fastest growing dynamics for all of us in direct selling. And looking back historically, I think some markets, or excuse me, some companies that maybe have their HQ in North America, or started the company there, have really struggled to expand and support and tap into these communities. What are some of the areas and kind of key challenges that companies have faced, and what can we be doing better?
Yeah, I when I presented last time at the DSN, I say something that at the at the end of the conversation, people came to me and told me how bold I was to say that, and I was talking about how important it is to know culture better than language, because most of the people is like, oh, I'm gonna even owners, and Al and I have seen this, that owners and CEOs and people commit to them and say, yeah, I'm going to learn the language, and next convention I'm going to do my speech in Spanish. And I'm like, you cannot learn a language in a month, or not even in a year, but you can learn the culture faster, and culture is more important than language, because I have seen people make so many mistakes culturally speaking, without intention. Sometimes, they say something to try to be funny, but they're being racist to people. And instead of connecting with people, they disconnect with people. And this could be, the whole audience at a convention. I've seen it with my own eyes, and I'm like, man, I cannot believe this is happening. And so, I express that during my presentation. I say, don't focus on learning the language, focus on learning the culture. It's easier and faster. You can learn the culture of a country, within a class, within hours, and learn, what are the politically, cultural speaking things that you need to say, do, and prepare for when you're opening a country. And, even though most of the countries in Latin America speak Spanish, they all have, little particular, cultural differences here and there that are more important than even learning the language. And you're not going to learn the language in 1 year, right? I'm a Spanish native speaker, and I've been speaking English for 20 years, and I still have an accent, and I will have an accent forever, and I'm still learning, words and ways to better speak English and in other languages. And so focus on learning the culture before you learn the language. And of course, adapt your business to the cultural needs of each country. And of course, most of the mistakes that I have seen companies made is not being prepared for also the economic differences of each country. We also talked a little bit about how companies launch products or even packages at a higher price than even in the US or Europe or Asia, in Latin American countries where the GDP is half or a quarter of the United States. And then I actually mentioned that the only 5 companies in Mexico that have gone to a $500 million or $1 billion are companies that we are all familiar with. Some of the top 5 companies, they have adapted their pricing structure to Mexican, economy. And so there are, few key things important to be successful in Latin America, in every single country: adapting to economic needs, adapting to cultural needs, of course, political and legal and compliance, and so many other things.
No, I really appreciate you making that point. It is so much more than just language and translations, and that's where I know many companies, all of us, have fallen short. Absolutely, in markets throughout the world. I want to talk a little bit more on the cultural aspect. How, Al, have you seen the best way to structure the organization? Let's start here in the U.S. To support the Hispanic and Latino communities here in the U.S. How do we structure that organization? What are some of the key roles that have that cultural understanding? How do we help our companies, gain deeper understanding and knowledge about the cultural aspects and dynamics?
Well, yeah, big question there.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with Alex in this, in the sense that even in a language, every country has its own almost version of Spanish. It certainly has its own slang, very specific, that is understood among the people. And realizing that not, folks in Latin America, not everybody in Latin America wants to be called a Mexican, or Mexico wants to be called a, there are, very specific countries with very specific history and culture and so on. So it does take a little bit of effort to do that. Now, how does that translate into what you do in the U.S.? It always comes down to people who you bring on. Do those people really do they understand those nuances? Okay. So who you hire to drive your Hispanic Latino initiatives is important. One of the things we always struggle with is having a marketing department in Texas, if in that case, who's going to understand how to sell to a Mexican or to a Colombian. And, so we have moved, we moved a lot of those things back into the original, into those countries versus trying to do it all from headquarters. So from a structure, I think the more you can push into those countries for them
Sure.
to develop their own materials, to develop their own marketing, where, maybe our packaging in the US tends to be more, understated. Maybe in these other countries, it needs to be overstated. They love we call it the concept of tropicalizar. Make it more tropical, make it more, make it more exciting. Can play a big role in that. And somebody sitting in Texas is not going to know that.
No,
It's very
absolutely.
hard. So for me, structurally, the more you can do in the country, in terms of marketing, in terms of um, product introduction. We got away from we're going to launch in the US first, and then we're going to launch in all these countries, and it's going to be okay. Well, in Latin America, as you just heard from Alex, price point is very, very important, right? I mean, you don't have the same disposable income there that you do in the US. So you can go in there and the worst mistake would be to sell it more expensive than in the US. But if you understand margins and you understand, having to ship it and so on, you understand why they would want to charge more. That doesn't work. So we went into local sourcing, finding people in those countries that can actually produce in countries, so you can leverage the lower cost of labor, but you can reduce a lot of the regulatory issues of trying to import products into those markets, and you can do it at a price. You can tweak the formulations and everything else in such a way that the price makes sense for that market. Hadn't been for that kind of a strategic initiatives, we probably wouldn't be in business in a country like Mexico. But by doing some of these things, we actually turned Mexico into the fastest international market for us in terms of percentage, because we started responding to the needs of the market and not just trying to copy paste what was going on in the US. So to answer your question, structurally, push as much of those decisions into the market, instead of trying to do it, from headquarters.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that goes, absolutely globally for me as well. Those I think that are responsible for the P&L, those that are, quote unquote, I think Blake always says closest to the fire. Whoever's closest to the distributor and the consumer, should be the one that's communicating, that's doing the promotions, that's developing programs, again, making sure that they really resonate and that they're relevant. One kind of interesting dynamic I've heard even more recently is, as some companies are looking to hire ahead of, let's say, even just North America, not Central or South America, but it's a requirement now to be at least bilingual, if not multilingual, to really have a deep understanding, of the cultures in the Americas. And I think that's an incredible way, to approach and just as reflective of the needs that are there and the size of these markets that are growing. I think it's really incredible. You both spoke about product and the importance of adapting product and pricing, not just in the US, but throughout Latin American markets. Can you share a little bit more specifics on what are some of the, the best ways to adapt those products, those pricing models? Is it developing new products? Is there, what are some of the key rules that companies should really make sure that they're adhering to?
I think, in my experience, when I have launched countries, I always like to take some of the corporate people down to visit countries, and so I have taken people to Mexico, to Colombia, to Peru, to different places, and I take them to see, I take them to go to, to Starbucks, and Starbucks in Latin America, they don't have the huge Trenta cups there because it's an American thing that you have to have, a liter of drinks. The biggest one in Latin America is, I think, the 20 ounce, not the 31, for example. And then, even in Colombia, if you go to Juan Valdez, which is the competition of Starbucks. Even the coffees there are even smaller, because culturally speaking, they just take a short, a smaller coffee. Then if you take them to Costco, and again, they don't have the huge packages for toilet paper or any other products. And so packaging and sizing for me and for people when I took them to Latin America and in different countries, and it has to do because of the economy. They move their economy on a daily basis or weekly basis, and they cannot afford to pay for a month supply of pretty much anything. And also because the places where they live, they don't have lots of spaces to store more stuff. That's an American thing, that we have houses of 5,000 square feet and we can store things, and now storage is the biggest thing. Now everybody has a storage to store things. And so for me, it's always, okay, we're going to launch Colombia, we're going to launch Mexico, let's go down there, come with me, the head of product development or even compliance. Let's go to the country, let's see what the country looks like, let's see what the country is used to in terms of, again, cultural speaking, sizes of products, type of products, ingredients. Sometimes they prefer to drink liquids and powders instead of pills. And so I think most of the companies that have failed in Latin America are the companies that don't adapt their products not only to the sizes or the economical needs, but also to the preference of the country. Even, I sometimes I do them to McDonald's. I don't like McDonald's, but McDonald's in other countries have their own local food as well, because they have to adapt not only to the Big Mac, but to their, I don't know, croissant, or, well, croissant is probably more French, but some other pan de bono in Colombia, or some other typical food of the country. So, they can attract customers and people to the restaurants. And so adaptation to economic, cultural needs are huge for what I have done in the past.
Absolutely. Al, I want to follow up with that. Have you seen it more successful to, create products that are unique to certain regions and markets, or do you look at more as adaptation, or maybe it's just more of the hero product that gets adapted and these unique product lines and products get introduced? What have you seen most successful?
Well, I can speak for everybody. I can speak for some of the things we did. One of the strategies that were definitely very successful is we took our key ingredient, a version of our key ingredient, and make sure that it was available in all these products that we were developing in those countries. So in that case, if glycans is the secret sauce, then we're going to have glycans in our product, but it's not going to be in the quantities that you would have. It would still be efficacious, but it would be, in such a way that it doesn't move the pricing out of the range. And then we take advantage of all the economies, local economies of, production and distribution and so on, to make sure that we, at the end of the day, we produce a product that people can afford. When we look at our numbers right now, 14 years into being in Mexico, for example, our top 5 products are all locally made. Right? So that tells you, now we still sell all the other stuff, we still import from the US, but the products that really move are the products that are priced properly. So we cannot overemphasize that. That is your first barrier if you do not adapt to that pricing, to the local pricing model. So for us, the strategy, stay in your lane. In our case, we are a glycan company, so we got to stay a glycan company, but adapt it so that it can fit the pocketbook of the local people that are enjoying your secret sauce, your key ingredient, so that the story stays the same, but the product composition definitely is going to be different than your US product. And I love Alex's insight on sizing. sizing is also important. We believe, we think that everything should be 30 days in the US because that fits a good auto ship program. But in Mexico, we know that people like to just get enough for the day. And that's why the nutrition clubs did so well in Mexico, were invented in Mexico, and then became a worldwide phenomenon because you get a daily shot of the product. You get to use the product for one day versus carrying around a big tub for 30 days, and forget about 60, 90 days. That just wouldn't make sense. But even 30 days could be a lot.
Yeah, I think that's such a smart approach. And I love that you said that the story needs to stay the same. I think that's really important. And identifying what those elements are in the brand, in the company that remain fixed, but then allowing a lot of flexibility, in regions around the world to allow that to be adapted that you've spoken about, but that everyone is still saying the same story, marching to the same drum. I think that's really important. Al, I also want to ask you another question around NFR. I know that you've done a ton of work uh, with this throughout your career. Can you share a little bit about how we should be looking at NFR and the strategic approach that you take?
Okay, so I mean, obviously, my career has been about opening up over 65 different markets. And so I've seen the right way to do it. I've seen the wrong way of doing it. And most of the time it's been wrong. So most companies have, it's not even the 80-20 rule. It's more like even the 10-90 rule. 10% of the markets they open really do well, and the rest just become a strain on the company. And that's because, they didn't do enough of that homework up front. So this leads me to this strategy, this NFR strategy, which frankly is a new strategy. The concept's been around a long time, but in terms of doing it in a way that's actually sustainable, that is a new strategy that aligns with what's happened just in e-commerce globally. Governments around the world had to figure out that their citizens are going to buy from websites outside of their country, and there's got to be a mechanism for them to be able to personally import some of those products into the country. So they've created actually, the rules, the laws, right, and the guidelines to govern that process. Now, Wayne, that's new. So when people heard of NFR 10 years ago, it was kind of a wild, wild west. But over time, with the pressures of global e-commerce, countries had to actually define what is the proper way to bring products into the country and then literally deliver door to door to a consumer in those countries. That opened up a great opportunities for companies like ours who need to do the right research before they go out and commit millions of dollars to a launch, right? Because for me, back in the days of launching, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was kind of the attitude, if you build it, they'll come, right? And you had to go big, you had to have big offices, you had to impress everybody, and that cost a lot of money. And most of the time, these international markets became cemeteries for a lot of companies in terms of their business. However, today you have the ability to go softly, call it, a market research phase that still allows you to get products into the hands of a consumer in those countries, but yet be able to test out your theories about product, about pricing, about everything else, right? And then as you do that, then also it will give you a sense for the demand in those markets, because all of us have had we always get approached with, I have the guy, I have the guy, I have the
Right.
person that's my God, he's gonna just explode this thing. He's the first nephew of the cousin of the person who is the president of it. right, Alex? We've all had the guy, right? And then once you go out there and you lay it all out, and then the business just not there. Yeah, you haven't done your homework. So this is really, for me, it's really about being able to do your homework, real time, on the ground, and test out all the different ideas, see where the demand is, and then your next phase becomes, now how do I create a more official launch out of this, pre-launch or this market study that I've been doing through my NFR program.
I really like that you referred to it as the market research phase, which, as you mentioned, is something that we skip. We kind of get pushed or pulled into these markets sometimes way earlier than we otherwise should. Don't do that due diligence. But the importance of finding that product market fit and then adjusting from there, looking at it as more of kind of an iterative process, I think is really important. And thank you for sharing that. Again, your experience there has been just incredible. I've watched it forever.
If you missed any part of our recent events or just want to revisit some of the speakers, topics, and replays, including our fall DSU event, visit the DSU On Demand Library. The library is an exclusive resource for DSN supporter companies, one of the many benefits designed to help you and your team stay engaged, informed, and one step ahead. If you work at a supporter company, simply log in using your unique company code to access this event's content, plus over 500 presentations from previous educational events. If you're interested in becoming a DSN supporter, you can contact us at support@directsellingnews.com. We also invite you to join us for our first ever DSU LATAM event, January 8th and 9th in Doral, Florida. Plus, save the date for the Spring DSU event and Global Celebration happening March 25th through the 27th at the Irving Convention Center in Irving, Texas. Registration is free. Visit dsnevents.com today.
I want to shift into Latin American markets a little bit more and talk kind of about expansion and growing those markets. Obviously, direct selling, was built on the power of relationships. It's something that's vital in these markets and in these regions, and that inevitably is going to lead to expansion, as Al just mentioned. We've talked about a couple of the challenges and the opportunities as we expand, whether it's product and pricing, cultural understanding. What are some of the other key challenges and opportunities that we need to be aware of as we expand?
Well, I think, the one that most of the companies focus on, even before the cultural ones that I think the ones that we talked are the one that no company do, until they know that they are doing the wrong thing. So most of the companies start with a legal side for either product registration or the ability to set up the company right, and being able to pull their money out of the country whenever they make any money. And so all of those legal and financial aspects, which are really, really important, because you invest money to get money back out of any of those countries. And so I think we didn't talk about those. Those are the obvious ones. And Al and I think, follow the news in Latin America more than anybody else, because we have been part of so many countries. And unfortunately, you have so many things going on in Mexico right now, and Argentina, and so many with new presidents and so many political changes that can always affect your business. And those are things that you cannot control. I just flew back from Mexico yesterday, and 7 of their high judges resigned yesterday, something that's going to change everything in Mexico again. And you had the peso going from 16 to 20 when they elected a new president. And then you have changes in Argentina, which nobody knew that have strengthened their currency in just a few months. And so you have this volatility of political situations going up and down. And in big markets like Mexico and Argentina, which are huge, probably the biggest economies outside of Brazil. Brazil is a completely different world. And I'll not talk about Brazil. I only shut down one company in Brazil many years ago, and it was because of uh, the political environment was so different and so difficult to deal with that we couldn't bear, after 5 years trying to do business there. And so that's one of the aspects that nobody can control, because you cannot control who gets elected, in 4, 5, or 6 years, and how the political environment is so much volatile than what it is here in the US or maybe some of the other countries in Asia or Europe.
That's great. Al, as you look at expansion into Latin America, can you share kind of some of the key markets? Where should the priorities and sequencing be of those markets and launches?
Well, so for me, I would look at it from, I always start from the US, right? Because, you might want to think global, but you got to act local. For me, most of my most successful launches internationally had to do with just the size of the business that we had in the US from that particular country, right? So, and I know some people do open markets based on the GNP and all these other stats. I always looked at it from where do I have leaders? Where do I have leaders that can actually leave the US, go into those markets, support those markets, come back, keep the relationship going? Because again, if we're built on relationship, those are the relationship that's going to really keep your business afloat. It's not going to be the relationship of the corporate office in those countries with those leaders. Rarely it is, especially in the beginning. With time, it will develop, but in the early days, it's really that relationship with the person back here. All right. So for me, I always start from, who do I have the most of in the U.S.? Well, I mean, no question, we have more Mexicans in the U.S. than we do any other Latino Hispanic group. So Mexico should always be a priority, a place to start, because you can really play off what I've called the ping pong effect, right? Because every Mexican in the U.S. knows a Mexican in Mexico, and most likely every Mexican in Mexico knows somebody in the U.S., and we can play off the strength of those relationships to actually at least create the market initially. With time, you will find more of the locals that are not connected back to the U.S. that will really drive the business. But what really gets the thing going is somebody in the U.S. knows somebody in Mexico. Somebody in the U.S. knows somebody in Argentina. Now, for those companies that now have expanded into certain markets like Spain and others, you're going to have those linkage as well, right, with Spain and some of these countries in Latin America. But Mexico definitely is a big one, the easiest one to work with. These days, Colombia seems to be the next most, I wouldn't say easiest, because of some of the, Alex will tell you about the nightmares there with the local regulatory process. But in terms of getting products there, and there's a lot of traffic going back and forth, and there's a lot of affinities back to the U.S. as well. And I would say, and this is something for people to keep in mind, as much, and this is not a political statement in any way, but some of that open door policy that we've seen over the last 4 years has actually contributed to creating a much larger pool in the U.S. of people, first generation immigrants that are really looking for a honest to goodness opportunity. And those people, they here before the American dream, they believe in the American dream, they're looking for opportunities, they're hungry, and they are going to be a continuous pool to pull from for the direct selling industry. And then we just need to know where that is. I know we see a lot of people from Venezuela, even though we cannot do business in Venezuela yet, but there's a very strong communities of Venezuelans that are forming, and not only in Miami. They are now forming in Dallas. They're now forming in other places. So that becomes a very fertile ground for our business model. So I'm not sure if I've totally answered the question there,
Yeah.
but at least you can see what my thought process is if I was deciding where would I go open first, and who, what would drive my decision making. And again, think global, but act local. What's going on in the US that you can leverage to make sure that you can ensure a strong, at least a strong launch that will then, obviously become a more organic growth internally. But, to get started, you need people here who know people there. I mean, that's always been the case.
Yeah, and again, that's such a great approach, and I appreciate you sharing those insights. And one of the big things I got from that was really being driven by leadership is the key indicator of where to go and how to expand. I think that's really important for all of us. So, Alex, Al mentioned Mexico, Colombia. What are some other markets that would be, top on your list there from an expansion and a priority standpoint?
Yeah, and I agree with what I'll say. Everything he said, it will be my approach. And I think the other market in Latin America that's been growing steadily, probably at the same rate as Colombia, is Peru. And I mentioned Brazil, but again, Brazil is an outlier, completely separate. Brazil, we all know that's bigger than Mexico, but Brazil has so many different laws than any other country in South America. It's much more difficult to register and do business in Brazil because they kept it so, Brazil is 300 million people. It's like another US. They are so independent. They build airplanes. People don't know that Brazil have, they're a huge potency in the world, that they do everything. And we know that big companies have come from Brazil. And so other than Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, Peru is probably at the same rate that Colombia. And something that I did in one of my last companies is that for South American countries like Colombia, and a few companies have tried this successfully. Some other companies have failed doing it, but you can have an approach of opening a smaller region within South America with, Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador and Bolivia. Ecuador and Bolivia are really small countries. Bolivia is smaller than Ecuador, but Ecuador has a huge culture of network marketing, and they switched their economy to a dollar economy many years ago. So that gives a little bit more stability. And so you have a lot of leaders going from Colombia, Ecuador to Peru, back and forth, and having, connections within all those three countries. They're all connected geographically speaking. And so those are really good. Argentina used to be a really good market. They had a lot of issues with currency control and government. Now, with the new president, things are turning around in Argentina. So in the near future, I think Argentina is going to become a big market again with the new president and the new laws that they are implementing there, which are really radical, and we don't talk politics here, but I think Argentina is going to become a good market probably within the next year or so.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. As you look at technology, let's talk about that for a second. Throughout the Americas, what role is and can and should technology be playing in connecting and supporting markets throughout the Americas?
Technology like WhatsApp is definitely essential. You got to learn how to do business and conduct a lot of your business through WhatsApp. It's been kind of interesting to watch, at least for us, the slowness of the digital type, e-commerce. For many, many, many years, cash and carry was the way to do business. And that has, pushed companies to open up a lot of distribution centers and so on. Very costly. So we have to consider how to adapt digital, the digital e-commerce, modern e-commerce in these countries, and making sure that it adapts to the way they do business. You heard Alex talk about the daily, weekly lifestyle, and that's true about product, but that's true also about compensation. People literally want to come and buy a product, sell it, make some money, and use that money to go and buy food and do something that day. So things like daily pay is very important. Now, daily pay, you can do it through technology, or you can do it through a discounting system, right? Where they buy it at a certain discount and they can sell it immediately, make the money. So we're moving now. We know that the future, I mean, some of these countries, such as Mexico, they're going to have to modernize how you do business, in that sense. And so that means we need to figure out ways that people can be more adept, through the cell phone. Again, everybody's got a cell phone. You can't design your system for a computer. Very few people will have a computer, but you need to design your system around the cell phone. You need to design your communication around something like WhatsApp, and maybe find ways to do transactions through WhatsApp. You got to create payment systems that makes it easy for somebody to do it without a credit card, right? So there's very creative ways for people to do that. So both how you receive money, how you pay out money, you need to be creative, because not everybody has access to a bank account, not everybody has access to a credit card. So you have to be able to offer more ways for people to pay and be paid. So those are technology solutions, and there's a lot of great companies both in those countries, and some that are actually also more US based, even though they operate out of those countries, but they're very visible in the US. And some of them will be at the event we're going to probably talk about in a little bit.
Yes.
So they can bridge the gap between our way of doing business here in the US and the way the business is done in those countries.
Thank you, Al. Alex, any additional thoughts on the role technology is playing?
Yeah, I think, I was looking at some numbers yesterday, and it's interesting to see, like, I have the numbers here, and this is something that I'm preparing for January, which is a great segue to that. But they are growing, the technology is moving towards that. Like, Mexico has 80 million people using cell phones, and Colombia 35 million, where, Colombia is a 45 million people country, and 35 million people are using phones, and they're moving towards 68% of people already shopping, and 44% people doing banking. And Argentina, 25% people is already moving money with cell phones, which is something that it's new for them, not only because of the technology is there, but it's been the government, the ones that have been delaying this modernization, to call it somehow, of moving money from one place to the other, because government always wants to control how do you move money, how can I tax you, how can I control you, more in those countries than here in the US. And so, for example, they don't have so many apps as we do here to transfer money, like Venmo and Zelle and some of the other ones. Some countries do, but Argentina is new to that because, again, of all of the changes in governments. And so it's getting there. It's growing really fast. People use one of the interesting numbers that I look at Colombia a few years back when I was working there is that more people have cell phones because they don't have laptops at home, or PCs or computers, because of the economy, and also because they don't have internet at home. And so a lot of people had to get their internet connectivity through phones, which is great, because you have more access to apps and things like that. And I completely agree with Al that, WhatsApp has become something huge in Latin America. Most of the companies that I worked with in the past and some that I consulting right now with, didn't understand that, because in the US, WhatsApp is not the number one app for communication. In Latin America, it is. Mexico, Colombia, if you don't use WhatsApp for your customer service, that's a must. You need to have WhatsApp as a way of you corporate communicating with the field, and back and forth, because that's the only way they communicate. They don't use any other app or communication within their cell phones. And even in Mexico, most of the carriers give you free WhatsApp. They don't charge you extra minutes or time for WhatsApp in Mexico and Colombia. So that's a huge advantage why you need to use WhatsApp.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it's empowering entrepreneurship and direct selling around the world. And it just emphasizes the point that really we need to be kind of driven through mobile. Again, I like approaching that first, to both your points, as opposed to starting with the desktop version, the computer version. Really interesting stats. Thank you for sharing that. So I know we're running short on time, because both of you are going to continue this conversation after we end this, but two quick questions I want to get your thoughts on. You both have advised a lot of companies, as well as been in-house. If you were advising a company that was preparing to start up, let's say had a great product, wanted to go the direct selling model, had a great compensation plan, would you advise them or recommend them taking a Latin American first approach in today's direct selling?
Now, is that compared to some other region, Wayne?
Yeah, meaning a couple companies have launched, didn't build the HQ in the US, but they initially launched in Mexico, or other Central and South American and North American markets. But any thoughts? Would you say, look, this is an amazing place to start, and then we'll expand out from there? Or would you advise them, hey, get a foothold in the US and then expand from there?
Wow, big question there. So again, depends on your. In my mind, it's going to be depending on your leadership. Where are you going to mobilize the fastest? The leadership that's going to help you drive your business, especially in the early days. If you believe that you can do it out of there, now again, if you have a product that's very specific to, let's say, Mexico, then drive it in Mexico. If you have, so the product choices is going to make a difference, but I think the biggest difference is going to be your leadership. There's no question that today it would make sense for companies, even U.S. companies, to have the infrastructure in places like Mexico, because they can take advantage of a lot of the the lower cost advantages that exist there. But you got to also think about how do you there's something about an American company that goes to Mexico, especially if it's a reputable company that has a little bit of track record. I think Mexicans and other Latin Americans look at it like, okay, this is legit. Right now, I haven't seen too many companies that started in Latin America and came to the US and became very successful. And if you think of it in terms of your biggest Latino market, Hispanic market is in the US, then if you really feel you have a product for the Latino Hispanic group, you could start it in the US and target that community immediately, build within that community. And I've seen some people do that very successfully, and then leverage what you've built here out into places like Mexico and Latam. Again, just thinking really fast. I mean, that would be the ways that I would look at at this decision-making tree here.
Again, I love that you started with letting leadership lead the way. I think that's really important. Alex, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with Al. Most of the companies make the mistake of just launching because you have to be in Mexico, or you have to be there, or it's the next natural market or move that you have to make, but you don't have the leadership, or your product doesn't adapt to the country. And so you have to make sure that you take the steps that are going to allow your field to thrive and to grow. Don't just launch as an American company with the products that have made you successful in the US and the packages and the pricing that works here in the US, because it's not going to work like that in Mexico. But on the other hand, I think I mentioned it on my presentation, Mexico has become the next China. Half of the things that the US consume are now made in Mexico more than in China. And that was, because of COVID. And so Mexico has become a huge economy. It's right here, it's our backyard from the US. But I have seen so many companies do it wrong just because it's right here. And it's because, like I'll mention, Mexico is one of the easier countries to do business with, compared to any other countries in Latin America. You can get products. You don't have to register products. You only need to get an import permit to get products into Mexico, and it's much easier than any other country there. But because of the easiness of doing business in Mexico, companies go and do it faster without any adaptation, and then they fail, and then they blame it on Mexico. It's not Mexico. It's your corporate guy that didn't know how to do it, and you didn't invest the time and the effort and the right amount of time and people and everything to do it right. And so and I also agree that it's a two. I'll call it a ping pong effect. I call it a two-way freeway. It's the same thing. When I launch other companies successfully in Mexico, I started here in the US, and I grabbed the base here, and I asked them, who do you know, which Mexican here in the US that they have family in Mexico. They send money back to their family in Mexico, because that's the number one source of income in Mexico, is money that people make here in the US and send back to their family. So instead of just sending money back to your family, what if you tell them, hey, I have a business opportunity here that I've been doing here in the US that is launching there, and it's going to give you a business opportunity there. You want to take a look at the business opportunity, the product, the company, etc. And I have done that successfully, and it's worked. And companies that I have launched in the past have been successful, building a base of Mexican Americans here in the US, and then doing it down in Mexico.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, final question, and then I'll let you off the hook and let you guys continue. So with all the exciting growth that's happening within the US, Hispanic and Latino markets, as well as throughout all of Latin America, what impact do you see this having on the larger direct selling channel over time?
Well, I think, I mean, we all know, I mean, I'm sure everybody who's listening to this knows that, the channel's has been a bit stagnant over the last few years. But what we've seen is that the companies that are having the most success have a strong Hispanic component, and that Hispanic component is going to continue to grow. You can talk about it from a birth rate point of view. You can talk about it from an immigration policy. We just know that Latino businesses in general in this country are going to continue to thrive and grow, and the numbers are going to become more and more exciting. So it definitely is worth investing in it, being thoughtful. Don't have a 1-year strategy. Don't have a, how do I go in there and get as much as I can, and then I'm out of there. That's hurt our industry a lot in these countries, because a lot of people have come in with a lot of promises that were not kept. So people have become a lot more cautious about big American companies that come in and make a lot of promises. You need to be committed. It's a 5-year, it's a 10-year process. It's not one of those, I'm going to open it, and if it doesn't work, I'm just going to shut it down. Once you do that, then, as a company, you're sending a message to every country you're ever going to open again the rest of your life that, this is not sure. And why would people want to hitch their wagons to yours if they know you might not be here a year from now? So there's got to be a longer term, and it's got to be one that's very holistic. You got to want to be a player, not only in the business side and the social economic side as well. Make a difference in those countries. Bring not only new product, new technologies, but also, bring ways for society to be better, be ready to contribute to the betterment of those societies in an authentic, genuine, real way, not just in somebody called it the Christopher Columbus strategy. Just come in, pillage, take everything you can, go, and then those strategies just don't work, and they kind of hurt the industry overall.
Yeah, they do. Thank you for sharing that. Alex, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, we have talked a lot about how the industry is evolving into something different. And so I think the future is going to be a hybrid where we use technology, we use the changes that are coming into the industry with, affiliate programs, using faster shipping methods, more of the social media adaptation. And I agree with Al, it has to be a long-term approach. You have to be committed to the market because, again, the way you do business and we all know the companies. We can name them right now and say, yeah, these companies did right, these companies did it wrong. And we can even mention, why and how they did it wrong. It's so easy for Al and me, and maybe you, Wayne, that have been in the industry for so long, to pinpoint at the mistakes that companies have made and what you are not supposed to do. But I think Mexico, it's the future again. It was 20, 30 years ago. And for the last 10 years, I have seen so many companies, again, do it wrong. And it's not Mexico, it's the company that did it wrong.
Right.
That, fail into Mexico. But Mexico continues to be, there's Mexican companies, that are growing at a double digit for the last 5 years. You have Betterware, which is a Mexican company that continues to grow. You have OmniLife that continues to grow even after Jorge Vergara died, and now his daughter is doing an amazing job growing the company. And you have so many local Mexican companies. Herbalife is starting to grow again, and companies that grew many, many years ago are growing again. And then you have other smaller companies that try to launch but did it wrong, and they're gone. And they say, oh, Mexico doesn't work. No, it was your company and the way you did it that didn't work. Mexico works. Mexico is going to continue to work, and Mexico is going to be, and it has been, even bigger than the US for many companies like Avon, like Herbalife. Mexico has done over $1 billion in revenue in 1 year, something that the US has never done in the past. And so it's a huge market, a great opportunity, something that I'm passionate about. I was born in Venezuela, but I've been working with Mexico for 20 years. I lived in Mexico 5 years. I love the Mexican culture, and I think it's a great country to continue to grow and explode in the next 10, 20 years.
Al and Alex, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate you sharing these incredible insights and for reinforcing the points of being leadership driven, taking a long-term approach, and making sure that we have the right strategies in place to succeed in any of our markets around the world. I know you both are going to continue this conversation. Any of the listeners, if you want to learn more, there is an incredible event, DSU LATAM event, January 8th and 9th in Miami. So make sure you go register at directsellingnews.com, and you'll be able to hear more from Al and Alex there. Thank you both for being here. Appreciate all you do for direct selling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in. Please take a moment to subscribe and give a 5-star rating and review to help Direct Approach continue to provide more candid insights and interviews for direct selling corporate executives. Plus, don't forget to register for our first ever DSU LATAM event, January 8th and 9th in Doral, Florida. Plus, save the date for our Spring DSU and Global Celebration, March 25th through the 27th. Visit dsnevents.com for more details. Thank you for listening and supporting DSN and the Direct Approach podcast.